Good evening, and welcome to Deep Sleep Stories. Tonight I'll guide you through a quiet tale. One of old kingdoms, worn paths, and 4 people who set out not to change the world, but to carry a truth the world had almost forgotten. This is a slow story. One for those who've grown tired of noise and are ready for something softer. There'll be no battles tonight. Only the sound of footsteps on old stone, the hush of falling snow, and the hope that maybe, just maybe, peace still has a place to rest. So close your eyes if you haven't already. Let go of the day. And follow me down a road where memory walks beside us. Let's begin. Our story begins on a winter morning, high above a valley that no longer had a name. A road once carved by merchants and monarchs, now buried beneath frost and forgetting. The road through Hollow Vale. The northern road had not been traveled in years. Once, it connected the proud kingdom of Airedale to the lowland courts of Vermont and the old trading cities beyond the Fen Hills. But war had broken the spine of that land, and no caravan, no merchant, no soldier had passed through Hollow Vale since the last banners fell. Now it was winter again. The third since the last treaty burned. And it smelled like war was coming. High in the misted ridges above the vale, a lone stone watchtower stood crooked, leaning as if exhausted. Its windows were hollow, glassless, staring blankly into the snow-drifted valley. Beneath it, the path sloped downward into the fog, and toward the edge of peace. There, for riders dismounted. Strangers, not entirely friends either. They had not expected one another. But they had been summoned. No formal scroll had brought them. No wax seal, no herald with silver trumpet. Only whispers. And a name. Caldritha's Gate. It was the place where the first accord had been signed, where 3 kingdoms had sworn to never take arms again over the blackened mines of the Vale. And now, word had come from a dying monk, carried by couriers too tired to lie. Someone had broken the accord. And if the truth could not be spoken aloud, it would be silenced by steel. So the message was sent out not to kings, but to those who remembered the blood. For such figures had answered. Not because they trusted one another, but because, deep down, they still believed in something. Perhaps not peace. But maybe, the memory of it. The travelers. Isla, first to dismount, said nothing. She adjusted her worn traveling cloak, patched at the shoulders where once a knight's sigil had been sewn, long since picked clean. She wore no sword at her hip, but a wrapped spear slung across her back, its shaft smooth and dark with years of sweat and weather. Garrett, broader and louder by nature, cursed softly as his boots sank into a crust of frozen mud. His armor was light, more suited for city brawls than mountain passes. But the way he moved said, "I've survived worse." He carried twin knives, plain and well-used. Thomas stepped down slowly, carefully, a man not built for long rides or cold wind. His fingers lingered at the clasp of his satchel, where he kept the sealed document that had brought him here. He wore ink stains on both cuffs, and his eyes twitched often, as if chasing memories only he could see. And then there was Rian, who arrived last, without sound. He said little. He had said little during the last war too. He did not dismount at first. He only sat atop his horse, watching the others, his face hidden behind a hood. But eventually, when no one moved to speak, he swung down in one smooth motion and led his horse to drink from a patch of melted snow. No one asked what he remembered. They all remembered something. The mission. It was simple. Or so the monk had said before dying. "If the 4 reach Caldritha's Gate," he whispered, "and if the scroll is read aloud, before the high sun on the 3rd day, then war will not come. Not yet." Simple, except for the terrain. Except for the history buried beneath it. Except for the men already moving through the Vale, those who would rather war burn again, for profit, for pride, for revenge. They would not let the scroll reach the gate. And so the riders did not travel openly. They wore no sigils. No banners. Only cloaks. And silence. The path begins. They moved in single file, down the slope, through frostbitten brush and the whispering hush of snow. The veil opened beneath them, long, narrow, white with cold. It was said to stretch 60 miles from ridge to river. No towns. No inns. No refuge. Only what was left of the old war. And whatever hadn't yet finished dying. Isla spoke first. "How far to the ruins?" Tomas answered, his voice faint. 2 days if we stay to the high road. 1 if we cut through Ember Hollow. Rian made a quiet noise. It could have been disagreement. Or memory. Garrett spit into the snow. "Then let's not freeze our way to diplomacy." No one laughed. The snow swallowed the sound. The first sign. They reached the valley floor by dusk. And there, in the shadow of old willow trees, they saw it. A broken cart. Its wheels split, its contents scattered, sacks of dried oats, half-burned crates, 1 torn boot. No blood. But the marks were clear. Footprints. 8. Heavy. Armed. They circled. Left east. Rian crouched low, touched one track with gloved fingers. 4 hours ago. Maybe less. Bandits? Garrett asked. Rian did not look up. Paid ones? No one said what they all thought. Someone knows we're coming. The veil was not empty. And peace, whatever it was, had not yet arrived. They reached Ember Hollow at nightfall, or what passed for night in that gray-bellied sky, which never quite darkened, never quite lightened. The fog had thickened, and snow drifted sideways, settling in still corners like whispered secrets. From the ridge above, the ruined hamlet looked like a handful of black teeth pressed into the white earth. No lanterns. No smoke. No signs of life. But the silence was not empty. It felt paused. Ember Hollow had once been a village. 50 houses, perhaps. A granary. A chapel. The bones of a smithy. The path that wound between the shattered buildings was crooked with frost and old wagon ruts. Roofs had collapsed. Doors hung open like mouths frozen mid-sentence. No birds called. No dogs barked. And yet, the air still carried the warmth of something recently disturbed. Rian was the first to say it. "Someone's been here. Within the day." His voice was low, steady. The others didn't question him. They led their horses into the remains of a corral near what had once been the baker's cottage, now a shell, its walls black with old flame. Snow had blown in through the empty window frames. Wind pushed through the beams with a sigh that sounded almost like breathing. Tomas stood still for a moment, staring at a broken gate swinging gently on one hinge. "I've been here," he murmured. "Years ago. Before the war." "Buying bread?" Garrett asked with a half-smile, already checking the alleyways for trouble. Tomas shook his head. "Carrying letters. The old vicar used to keep a ledger." He didn't say what was written in it. They made camp in the chapel, or what remained of it. The bell tower had half fallen, and the iron cross at its peak now leaned against a pile of stones like a tired sentinel. Inside, the floor was swept clean by wind, and the altar was nothing but a scorched beam across broken stone. Still, it was shelter. Garrett lit a small fire, more glow than heat. Rian stacked stones to protect the flame from drafts. Isla spread her travel cloak over the cold stone and sat with her spear across her knees, watching the doorway. Tomas clutched his satchel and sat apart. No one asked what he carried. But they all knew it mattered. The stillness. The fire crackled softly, its light flickering across the cracked walls and the worn faces of the travelers. Outside, the wind shifted. Not howled. It was too weary for that. It moved like something tired of being heard. Isla was the first to speak, her voice soft. "My commander once told me the wind speaks louder where too many died." Garrett looked up, chewing on a piece of dried fruit. "And what's it saying now?" Isla didn't answer. She didn't need to. Tomas unwrapped his gloves, exposing pale fingers, ink-stained and calloused in strange places. He rubbed his hands together slowly and stared into the fire, as if waiting for it to say something. "My brother died here," he said. "Somewhere in the valley. He was only a courier, not a soldier. He glanced down at his satchel. The last message he carried was never found. No one even knew who killed him. The war had no face back then, just shadows and mistakes. The others said nothing. But the silence shifted. And held him. Later, as the fire burned lower, Rian stood by the doorway. He hadn't spoken in over an hour, but he'd been listening, not to them, but to the dark. "Something's out there," he said. Not fear. Not certainty. Just awareness. They heard it too soon after. A soft sound, not a footfall, exactly, but the suggestion of one. A weight shifting. A breath held too long. Snow compressed. Then again. Garrett rose, blades drawn, one in each hand. "Could be a fox," he said. "Or could be someone watching," Rian replied. Isla moved beside the doorway, eyes sharp. Her hand slid to the shaft of her spear. Tomas stayed still, gripping the satchel. They waited. Then they saw it. Not a figure. Not a weapon. A light. Small. Amber. Flickering. It moved through the street outside like a floating lantern, but too low to be carried by a person. It bobbed once. Twice. Then paused behind a broken cart. The flame stilled. Then blinked out. No one moved. Garrett whispered, "That wasn't wind." Rian didn't blink. "They're watching. Judging us." "Why not attack?" Isla murmured. "Because they don't need to," Tomas answered. His voice was quiet, but firm. "Not yet." They took turns keeping watch. Each hour dragged longer than the last. Garrett whittled the end of a stick with one blade, just for the motion. Rian stood so still he might have been a statue. Isla's eyes never left the dark. Tomas, when it was his turn, read from a small journal by the firelight, but never turned the page. They did not sleep much that night. Not for fear of blades, but for fear of memory. And the feeling, stronger now than before, that something in the valley had awakened. And it did not want to be forgotten. The road narrowed after Ember Hollow. Once, it had been wide enough for carts and riders to pass side by side. Now it was hardly more than a track, barely visible beneath the snow. The forest had crept inward over the years, as if reclaiming what man had lost, not angrily, but patiently. It felt like a place the world had forgotten. And yet, the air was not alone. They rode in silence, hooves muffled, cloaks drawn. Above them, crows circled slowly in black figure eights, but did not call out. The snow had become fine, powdery, too dry to stick, too soft to crunch. Rian rode ahead, his eyes never resting. He did not speak, but his movements told a story, subtle glances to the trees, fingers twitching near the hilt of his blade. He'd felt this before. In Drenfall. Right before the trap. Isla rode just behind, her shoulders squared, back straight despite the cold. Her face was hard to read, calm, composed, but her hands never left her spear. It wasn't fear. Not quite. But something near it. She'd been ambushed once. She wouldn't be again. Tomas rode third. He didn't like forests. Too much space for what couldn't be seen. He whispered to himself, not full words, fragments of thoughts, lines from old letters, pieces of names. He didn't realize he was doing it. Garrett brought up the rear. He looked relaxed. He wasn't. The path opened suddenly, not into a field, but into a clearing circled by bare trees, roots twisted like knots, branches frozen in reaching shapes. In the center stood a weathered signpost, its wooden planks long gone, eaten by time. From one beam, a rope hung, and below it, a rusted manacle, swinging. No bones. Just the iron. They dismounted. Garrett spat in the snow. "I don't like this." Rian stepped toward the post. He touched the wood. It moaned beneath his fingers. "This isn't warning," he said softly. "It's memory." Then a voice. Low. Even. Unapologetic. "Remind you of something, traveler?" They turned. 5 men stood at the tree-line. They hadn't made a sound. No snapping branches. No rustle of brush. Just there, like the forest itself had exhaled them. Armor mismatched. Weapons clean. Faces blank. Banners none. Their leader was tall, lean, and smiling, a smile that didn't reach the eyes. "You travel quiet," he said. "Almost like you're carrying something the wind shouldn't hear." Garrett said nothing. He shifted one blade in his hand. Isla stepped slightly forward, between Tomas and the strangers. Rian didn't blink. "You headed south?" The leader continued, voice smooth. "Can't imagine why. There's nothing down there but frost and failed kings." Isla replied coldly. "Then you won't mind us passing through?" "Oh, not at all. Not at all." He stepped closer. The others behind him didn't move. "But the way we see it, folks moving quiet usually carry one of two things: gold or secrets." His eyes landed on Tomas. "And you, little bird, look like neither." Tomas tensed. His fingers clenched around the leather strap of his satchel. Garrett snorted. "We're no threat to you." "No," the man agreed. "But peace is." He turned slowly, letting his gaze fall over each of them in turn. Rian. Isla. Tomas. Garrett. "You know what happens when men talk too much about treaties? People get hopeful. And hopeful men make poor killers." He walked a slow circle around them, boots barely leaving prints in the snow. "You're not soldiers," he said finally. "Not anymore. But you ride like ones who remember how." He stopped beside Rian. "I know your face," he said. "You were in Drenfall." Rian didn't flinch. "So were you." For the first time, the man's smile faltered. "We buried 100 men in one night." Rian's voice was quiet. "You buried them." The clearing felt tighter. The air brittle. One of the other men shifted, just an inch. A hand twitched toward a sword. Isla saw it. The others felt it. The moment teetered. But the leader raised a hand. "Enough." He stepped back, smile returning, thinner this time. "No blades. Not tonight." He looked at Tomas once more. This time softer. "You think that scroll will save a kingdom?" Tomas whispered. "I don't know. But I'll carry it anyway." The leader paused. Then he nodded. "That's the saddest kind of courage." He turned to his men. "Let them pass." And just like that, they vanished, back into the woods, swallowed by frost and shadow. The travelers stood still for a long moment. Only when the trees stopped whispering did they breathe. Later, on the road again. No one spoke for over an hour. The snow had returned, slow and steady, laying down silence like a blanket. The hoofbeats were distant things, as if not their own. When Tomas finally spoke, his voice was hoarse. He knew. Rian nodded. He did. "Then why let us go?" Garrett spat. "Because they want to see us fail. No need to bloody their boots for that." Isla murmured. "Or they're not sure if it matters." "Not yet." The wind shifted. And in the distance they heard it. A bell. One ring. Faint. Hollow. Too far for sound. Too clear to be imagined. The old bridge had broken in 2 places, its stone spine cracked, as if some forgotten giant had stepped on it once in anger. Beneath it, the dry riverbed wound like a scar through the frost-hardened land. Wind moved along it like breath through a flute, long, hollow, haunting. Beside the ruin, half hidden beneath a rock shelf, stood the remains of an ancient way station. Its walls were broken, its chimney black with soot. A narrow cave yawned behind it, once a storeroom, perhaps, now a mouth of darkness. They chose it for shelter. Not because it felt safe, but because it was the best lie the land could offer. The fire was small, made from broken beams and dry root. Its flame cracked gently, barely warming the hands that reached for it. Outside, the cold curled in layers, not sharp, but constant, like fingers brushing the back of your neck. The kind of cold that makes you question your own warmth. They sat in a half circle. No one too close. No one too far. Rian cleaned his blade, slow, methodical. His eyes stayed on the steel, but his thoughts, clearly, were not. Garrett whittled a stick, though his hands never truly rested. He'd seen too many ambushes born in what should have been peace. Isla oiled the haft of her spear, her gaze drifting between the firelight and the trees beyond. Tomas sat furthest from the mouth of the cave, the scroll still tucked in his satchel, pressed against his ribs like a second heartbeat. For a time, none of them spoke. Not out of distrust, but because the quiet finally belonged to them. Eventually, Garrett broke the stillness. "So," he said, running the blade along the stick's edge, "how many days left?" Tomas didn't look up. 2. If the weather holds. And if it doesn't? Then we'll arrive late. Rian said simply, not pausing his work. Does late mean war? Tomas finally met his gaze. Late means no voice at the gate. That was enough. Later, as the fire settled to a low, glowing hush, Isla asked softly, "That man in the clearing, the one without the banner. You knew his kind?" Rian nodded once. Garrett answered before he could. "Not their kind. Their choice. Men like that don't serve kingdoms. They serve outcomes." Isla's brow furrowed. "He let us go." "No," Rian corrected. "He let Tomas go." A long pause. Then Tomas, in a voice too low to echo, whispered, "He asked me if I thought words could save kingdoms." He looked into the fire. The light caught in his eyes like smoke. "For years I believed they could." No one interrupted him. "I wrote letters that ended battles. I transcribed treaties. I drafted apologies from kings who never meant them. I thought, maybe ink was lighter than blood. Easier to carry." He turned to look at the satchel. "I still carry this one. But I don't know if I believe in it anymore." Rian set his blade aside. "That's not your job now." Tomas frowned. "What is?" Rian replied. "To carry it anyway." A breeze moved through the cave entrance, cold but not biting. Isla leaned forward. Her voice was a murmur. "There was a story where I grew up," she said. "A knight nameless, who walked across the mountains after a great war. Every village he entered, he gave away a piece of his armor. Breastplate, gauntlets, helmet." Garrett raised a brow. "Why?" "Because he said the armor didn't save him. Only slowed the wounds." "And what happened when he gave the last piece away?" Tomas asked. "He didn't bleed anymore." The fire snapped, sending sparks upward. One landed on Garrett's wrist. He brushed it off with a grunt. He looked to Rian. "You believe in peace?" Rian stared into the ash. "I believe in tired men." He reached out and nudged the firewood. "And that even swords want to rest." The wind grew louder outside. Not a howl. A breath. It moved through the stones, across the broken bridge, and into the ash. That night, none of them slept well. Isla sat the first watch. Her eyes never closed. Garrett took the second, pacing like a slow animal, blades at his sides. Tomas had the third. But he didn't rise for it. He was dreaming. Tomas' dream. A corridor of black stone. A woman in white, hair flowing behind her like water. She was writing, but her pen left no mark. And when he tried to speak, no sound came. She turned to him. Her eyes were not eyes. They were mirrors. He woke in a sweat. The fire was out. The cave still. Only Rian was awake, sitting in silence, back straight, eyes open. Tomas whispered, "Why do you never sleep?" Rian answered, "Because I know the sound of what's coming." The trees gave way to slate and rock, to cliffs with veins of ash-colored stone that cut like scars through the hills. The light changed too, flatter, colder, as if the sun itself dimmed in memory of something. Then they saw it. The tower. Or what remained of it. It stood at the base of a broken ridge, leaning, not from age, but from collapse. Once tall enough to see 3 kingdoms from its peak, now it was a hunchbacked ruin of cracked mortar and burned stone. The upper floors were gone. Only the first and second remained, jagged like snapped bone. But what caught their eyes first was not its size. It was the color. The stones near the base were black. Not from shadow. From fire. They approached slowly. No snow rested on the walls, though it lay thick all around. Wind curled around the broken doorframe, whistling low, as though playing a song no one had sung in years. Garrett muttered, "This place stinks of ghosts." Isla dismounted first. She held her spear loosely, but her steps were precise. Rian said nothing, but he didn't tie his horse. Tomas stayed back a moment longer, staring at the ruin with eyes wide, lips parted. Then he whispered, "I know this place." The others turned. "You've been here?" Isla asked. Tomas shook his head. "No. But I've seen it. In a drawing. A sketch made by my brother before the war." He moved forward slowly, almost reverently. He wrote on the back, "The tower that fell twice." They stepped inside. The first floor was mostly intact, stone walls still standing though cracked. The roof above had collapsed, spilling beams and slate down into a pile of half-frozen rubble. But someone had cleared a path through it. Not recently. But not long ago either. Isla ran her fingers along the wall. "Marks here," she said. "Sword. Not battle, practice. Repetition." Garrett studied a soot-marked pillar. "And here, fire. Controlled." "Campfire?" Tomas asked. Rian knelt beside the hearth. "No. Cleansing." They found the stairs, half crumbled, and climbed carefully to what had once been the second floor. The room was roofless, open to the pale sky. A few wooden joists jutted like ribs from the stone. In the corner, they found it. A table, half burned. A chair, fallen sideways. And on the wall, a scrawl of charcoal. Rian read it aloud. "I came here to forget. But the stones remember." They stood in silence. Tomas stepped forward and placed a hand on the wall beneath the writing. His fingers trembled. "My brother's letters, they stopped after this tower." He looked at the others. "I think he tried to come here. Maybe he thought this place could hide something. Or bury it." Garrett exhaled through his nose. "Or maybe he was looking for something no one wanted him to find." They stayed longer than they should have. The wind began to pick up. The light grew weaker, though the sun had not yet set. Isla circled the edge of the tower's interior, then stopped near a pile of shattered brick. She knelt. There, beneath a sliver of broken wood, lay a leather-bound book, warped by time. She opened it gently. Blank pages. Mostly. But on the inside cover, 5 words written in ink, smudged but legible. "If you read this, speak." She handed it to Tomas. He held it like it weighed more than iron. And in the tower's echo, he whispered, "I remember you." The wind fell silent. Then, the sound of stones shifting. A corner of the floor buckled, not enough to fall, but enough to groan. Rian was at Tomas' side in an instant. "Time to go." As they left, the sky dimmed further, clouds sweeping in with strange speed. Before they crossed the threshold, Tomas turned back. He didn't know why. But he felt, just for a breath, that someone was watching. Not with malice. With waiting. Outside, the snow had returned. Thin, soft, endless. They rode in silence. Only when the tower was far behind did Garrett speak. "That place, it fell twice, eh?" Isla looked back once, over her shoulder. "Some things fall until they're remembered." It was as though the valley itself refused to mark time. The land dipped slowly, like a great hand cupped in stone. The trees thinned into crooked sentinels, twisted with wind and age, and the snow beneath them turned faintly red, not from blood, not from iron, but from the color of the soil below. Some places simply remember too much. "This is it," Tomas whispered. He didn't know how he knew, but his voice trembled as though his lungs had known before his thoughts. Rian nodded. "The Red Hollow." Isla scanned the valley carefully. "It's too quiet." Garrett's voice came behind her, low and sharp. Too willing. They descended slowly. No path guided them, only the worn curve of the land, and the feeling of being drawn in by something unseen. Old bones marked the ridge lines, not human, not now. Splintered beams, rusted chains, the metal rings of siege towers long crumbled. Moss crept across them like a second burial. No birds called. No breeze stirred. But the place was listening. At the center of the basin, seated on a flat stone like a forgotten monument, sat a figure. Motionless. Cloaked. Small against the vast silence of the field. They approached carefully. Every hoofstep felt loud. Every breath, disrespectful. The figure made no move, even as they neared. It wasn't indifference. It was waiting. Like someone who had rehearsed this moment in solitude too many times to be surprised. Tomas dismounted first. Then Rian. Then Isla. Garrett stayed a heartbeat longer, before following with a grunt. No weapons were drawn. But no one was unready. The figure raised a hand palm open. "For," she said softly. "As it always was." Her voice carried like wind across dry parchment, brittle, calm, unchanged by time. Tomas stepped closer. "You knew we were coming?" "No. I knew someone would come. Eventually. The gate is not so easily forgotten." She pulled back her hood. A woman, older than any of them, with hair like smoke and a face carved by winters. Not hard. Just weathered. Worn like riverstone. Eyes pale, but deep. And something behind them, grief that had learned to sit still. "I served under Lord Arian," she said, "when he still believed peace was a thing one could carry like a sword." "You were in the hollow?" Rian asked. "I still am," she replied. "Even if my feet have not moved." They sat around her, unbidden, not from command but gravity. There was something in her presence that required listening. The woman touched the ground beside her gently. "This place is not sacred," she said. "But it is remembered. The land here drinks memory. It's in the soil, the stone. Even the trees grow bent beneath it." Isla looked up at the twisted limbs above. "And what do they remember?" The woman turned to her. "The moment after battle. The silence that did not feel like peace." Garrett shifted. "You live here?" "I remain," she said. "There's a difference." "And why?" She turned to Tomas. "Because he came here." She reached into her cloak, and withdrew a folded piece of parchment, yellowed with age, frayed at the edges. "I believe this belongs to you." Tomas took it with shaking hands. His brother's name was written on the seal. The wax had cracked, but not broken. He opened it. "Read." Twice. Then looked up, eyes bright with water. "He knew," he whispered. "He knew what they would do. He knew this valley would be erased from the treaty, and he came anyway." The woman watched him without sympathy or sorrow. "Words are weapons. So are silences." Rian asked. "Why give this to us now?" "Because someone must still carry them. And if it cannot be kings, then let it be messengers." They sat a while longer. No one rushed. Even Garrett grew still. Isla whispered a question. "What did you lose here?" The woman's voice was steady. "Certainty." Then softer. "And a daughter. Whose name I stopped saying so I would not lose it too." When they finally rose, the wind stirred, the first true wind in hours. It whistled low through the bone frames of old war machines, circled the figures like an unseen hand. "Will the gate open?" Tomas asked. The woman did not answer directly. "It waits," she said. "As all gates do. For those willing to knock." She turned away. "Your road is not much farther. But it narrows again. That is the nature of endings." As they mounted, Rian lingered behind. He stepped once closer to the woman and asked, very quietly, "Were you ever named?" She did not smile. But her voice was calm. "I was. Once. But I prefer the name that silence gave me." And with that, she turned from them fully. They left the hollow in silence. But as they climbed, Tomas looked back, and the stone she sat upon was bare. No figure. No cloak. Just the wind. Later, they made camp beneath a steep outcrop overlooking the southern slope. The trees had returned, lean and close. The fire was small. No one spoke of the woman. But they all sat closer than they had the night before. Tomas unwrapped the scroll again, not the one from the monk, but his brother's. He read it once more by firelight. Then held it to his chest. And Isla, beside him, said gently, "Do you believe him?" Tomas nodded. "I don't think he came here to save anything. I think he came to make sure someone else would." Far across the ridgeline, beyond a stretch of frostbitten trees and mist-cloaked hills, it stood like a silent wound in the land, tall, dark, and still whole. 2 watchtowers flanked it, but no light burned in either. No movement stirred. It looked abandoned. Or perhaps just tired of being seen. The trail narrowed as they climbed higher, weaving between stone and root. Snow had thinned, replaced by slick earth and brittle grass, whispering underfoot. They did not speak much that day. But the quiet between them had changed. Not distrust. Not distance. More like the stillness of those who know the next word will change everything. They made camp on the high slope, sheltered by a curved rise of stone that watched the valley below. It wasn't the highest point, but it gave them a view of what waited ahead. The gate. Unmoving. Watching them back. The fire they built was small. Not because wood was scarce. Because flame attracts eyes. Even forgotten gates might remember flame. Tomas sat apart, the 2 scrolls unrolled in his lap. The words blurred together, not from weather, not from light, but from the weight they now carried. He remembered how his brother had signed his letters. "If I do not write again, let it not be because I chose silence." And now he understood. Truly. Isla remained close to the fire, sharpening her spear point with a stone more worn than sharp. The rhythm of it calmed her. Not preparation, not anymore. She had decided long ago she would not raise her weapon unless she must. But if she must, she would not hesitate. Garrett stood with his back to the fire, arms crossed, watching the tree line below. His shoulders were tense. Too tense. He'd laughed less the past 2 days. Spoken less. But in that silence he heard something. Not from the forest. From inside. Rian stood on the ridge, eyes fixed on the gate. He hadn't slept in a full night. Not really. His body rested. But his mind, no. It wandered paths no longer paved, through names no one else had kept. He had once opened a gate like that. And men had died because of it. When the moon rose, hollow, silver, and oddly still, it was Isla who spoke. She asked the question they had all carried. "What if the gate doesn't open?" Tomas looked up. "What if we do everything right, and it stays shut?" Garrett sat down finally. Not hard. Just slowly. Like someone putting down a burden for a moment. "I think," he said, almost quietly, "it's not about the gate. Not anymore." They looked at him. He tossed a small twig into the flame. It snapped once. "It's about us getting there. All of us. Still willing." Rian spoke without turning. "And what if one of us isn't?" That silence lasted longer. Tomas closed his eyes. "I want it to open. I do. I just don't know if the kingdoms want peace. Or if they just want quiet," Isla said. "Sometimes quiet is where peace starts." Garrett shook his head. "Sometimes quiet is just what happens when the graves are full." No one had an answer to that. But they felt the weight of it. The honesty of it. Later, near midnight. They took watch, as always. First Isla. Then Rian. Then Tomas. He stood beneath the edge of the slope, scrolls tucked under his arm. The wind brushed his cloak back, revealing the scars on his forearms. Old, but not invisible. He had never fought in battle. But he'd walked through its bones. And copied the names of the dead. At last watch, Garrett stood alone. His posture was different. Less guarded. More still. He reached into his bag, pulled out something wrapped in cloth. He unrolled it slowly. It was a medal, not polished, not worn. He stared at it a long time, then dug a small hollow in the earth beside the fire, and buried it. No ceremony. Just soil. And silence. Dawn. The light came slowly. Not gold. Not silver. More like the pale light of memory. They stood at the edge of the slope, the gate visible through the thinning mist below. Closer now. Larger. Unchanged. But somehow, waiting. Rian adjusted the straps across his chest. No more stops. Isla nodded. Tomas closed his scrolls. Garrett said, "If it opens, I want to be the one who knocks." They smiled. Faint. Real. Then mounted. And rode the last mile into the valley. The mist had begun to lift from the lowlands, pulled upward like old breath. The morning was pale and weightless, as though even time itself were holding still. And there it stood, black stone, half swallowed by the land, its arch sealed shut with a slab of smooth, seamless granite. It looked more like a monument than a door. But doors forget their purpose when left unopened too long. They rode in silence. No more words. The rhythm of hooves on damp earth. The hiss of breath in cold lungs. The closeness between them, like the pause before a final line in a prayer. As they neared the base of the hill, the trail curved sharply, then broke open, and before them stretched a basin of land they had not seen on any map. And there it was. The river. It moved strangely. The water ran fast, too fast for its size, but it made no sound. No gurgle. No splash against stones. Only the sight of motion, like silk pulled beneath glass. Its surface reflected no clouds. Only memory. Tomas was the first to speak. There wasn't supposed to be a river. His voice was quieter than usual. Not uncertain, but reverent. As if saying it too loud would awaken something. Garrett frowned. "It's not natural." Rian dismounted slowly, eyes never leaving the water. "No," he said. "It's not." A narrow bridge stretched across the river, a structure of wood and rope, bowed under time, but still intact. And at its center, a figure. Standing alone. Gray cloak. Still posture. Face bowed. Not armed. But not unarmed either. The horses grew restless. Isla soothed hers with a low breath, but even she felt it, that pulse beneath the surface of the world. The feeling that the land itself was watching. They dismounted. Left the animals tethered among the crooked trees. And walked. When their boots met the bridge's wooden slats, the figure raised his head. His face was pale, angular. Not old, but ageless in that unsettling way of those who have lived too long without asking to. A symbol was stitched to his cloak. A sun split in half. Tomas gasped softly. "High mark." Isla nodded once. "The fourth banner," Garrett whispered. "But High mark was erased from the accord." "Exactly," Rian said. The man did not greet them. He only said, "Four have come," as it was once foretold. They stopped a few steps away from him on the bridge. The river whispered beneath. Still no sound. Just the motion of water shaped like memory. The man's voice was like smoke through linen. "You carry peace," he said. "Or so you say." He turned to Tomas. "And you carry guilt. Bound in vellum. Dried in ink. Heavy as stone." Tomas stepped back a half step, his hand over the satchel. The man raised one hand. "I'm not here to take it. Only to ask?" He gestured behind him, to the sealed gate. "It waits. And it listens. But it does not open for words alone." He looked at each of them. "So tell me. Not what you carry, but why you came." Isla was the first to answer. "To end something," she said. "Not because it's over, but because it's gone on too long." Garrett looked to the river, then back. "I came because I'm tired of fighting battles I didn't start. And I don't want the next ones to start without me speaking." Tomas's voice trembled. I came because my brother couldn't finish the path. So I took his step. Then all eyes turned to Rian. He said nothing at first. Then quietly, I came to bury a blade I haven't drawn yet. The man nodded slowly. Then you may pass. He stepped aside. But as Tomas passed, the man placed a hand lightly on his arm. You have a second scroll, he said. One not written for kings. Tomas didn't answer. The man tilted his head. If you still carry it at the gate, it will change what opens. Tomas asked. Should I burn it? The man only smiled faintly. Scrolls burn. Memory does not. As they crossed, each of them glanced down into the river. And each saw something different. Isla saw a battlefield without banners, just faces. Faces she remembered. Garrett saw fire in the windows of a tavern long gone. Rian saw a child running through halls of stone, laughing once, long ago. And Tomas saw his brother. Writing. Still writing. And never looking up. They reached the far side. The bridge did not collapse. The man behind them was gone. Only the soundless river remained. Before them rose the gate. Its stone darker now, almost alive with quiet tension. Symbols curled across its surface. Not words, not language, just echoes of promises no longer kept. Tomas stepped forward. Opened the first scroll. His voice shook on the first words, but grew stronger as he read. When he reached the end, the scroll trembled in his hands. And then, flamed white. It vanished without smoke. The gate was still. Then a crack. A sigh. And a line down the middle opened like a second breath. Dust fell. Light pulsed. Not from inside, but from memory. And the gate began to move. Not forced. Not pride. It listened. It opened. Not with thunder. Not with wind. But with the sound of dust falling through sunlight. A seam split down its center, wide enough for one rider to pass, though none rode now. The earth seemed to hold its breath. No voices called from beyond. No flags waved. No herald stepped forward. Just a long corridor, carved from the mountain itself. And at the end of it, light. They stepped inside together. 4 shadows stretching across stone. The sound of their boots echoed softly, not loud, not sharp. The kind of echo that's heard more in the heart than the ear. No guards. No torches. Only smooth stone walls. Empty. Undisturbed. It was not a place of fear. Nor of power. It was a place built for witnessing. Tomas clutched the second scroll. His brother's letter. The one written in a camp that no longer stood, during a war no longer mentioned. He hadn't spoken of it since the river. Now, it beat against his ribs like a second heart. They emerged into a chamber. Circular. Wide. Silent. The ceiling opened above them like a dome of pale sky. High windows let in slanted light that touched nothing directly. Around the edge of the room stood 12 stone chairs, all empty. No dust. No crowns. In the center, a low pedestal. Carved but blank. This is it, Rian murmured. The Hall of Accord, Isla said. Where the first treaty was signed. Garrett ran his fingers along the edge of one chair. Feels like it could still happen. Right now. Tomas stepped into the center. No, he said softly. It already has. They stood in silence for a long time. No one moved to sit. No one asked what came next. Because deep down, they knew. The scroll had already burned. The words had already been spoken. This was not a place of action. This was a place of acknowledgement. Tomas unwrapped his satchel. Inside, his brother's letter, creased, faded. He stepped up to the pedestal. And laid it there. He didn't read it. Didn't speak. But the paper settled without sound, as if the stone had waited for that weight and no other. A wind stirred. From where, none could tell. It moved through the chamber like a memory, soft, brushing across faces, robes, stone. And then, one by one, The chairs began to warm with light. Not from torches. Not from flame. From within. Isla turned slowly, watching. 12 chairs. 12 lights. 12 stories untold, unspoken, unwritten. Until now. Garrett whispered, "There are no kings left." Rian replied, "Then let no crown rise again." Tomas stepped back from the pedestal. His eyes were dry. But he looked younger. Not less tired. Just more whole. A sound followed. Not a door. Not a bell. More like a stone being lifted from soil. And from the far side of the room, an arch opened. Light spilled through, not white, not gold, but the color of a quiet morning. They walked toward it. No one looked back. Because the gate was not meant to close. Not this one. Not anymore. As they stepped out into the open air, the wind met them, cool, steady. The land beyond was green. Wild. Still untamed. And far on the horizon, new hills rose. No map had drawn them yet. No border marked them. They paused. For travelers. No longer the same. Not by blood. But by bond. Garrett looked up. "We did it." Isla nodded. "No war." "Not today," Tomas said. "Not just no war. A chance." Rian looked to the sky, then to the path ahead. And for the first time, he smiled. They began to walk. No orders. No oaths. Just feet meeting ground. And ground, at last, willing to listen. And somewhere, in a hall of stone behind them, a single letter remained. Not unread. Not forgotten. Just resting. Where it always belonged. Epilogue, a letter never sealed. A year had passed since the gate opened. No armies had marched. No horns had sounded. No new kings had risen. But something had changed. In border towns where silence once ruled, merchants had begun to speak again. Not loudly, not boldly, just enough to let a stranger pass without a hand on the hilt. Bridges, once guarded, now stood unwatched. Letters crossed hands without needing wax. And the wind, at night, moved through the valleys like a language finally remembered. In a quiet village near the southern hills, a boy sat beneath an old willow, reading a scroll aloud to his sister. The ink had faded, but the words were clear, stories of a journey, a tower, a river that flowed where no river should. He didn't know where the story came from. Only that it was left in the village's post hall, wrapped in plain cloth. There was no name on it. Just one line at the end. "May peace not wear a crown, but a face." Far away, in a valley grown green again, a small stone pedestal stood uncovered. On it, a single letter. No seal. No dust. And across the top, in soft script, "He did not arrive alone." And somewhere beyond maps, where no banners flew and no lines were drawn, 4 sets of footprints faded gently into spring grass. And the road ahead? Still open. Still listening.